Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Friday morning, June the 10th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I'm just waking up, having some coffee, and glad it's Friday. And thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. I've had some problems with my connection to Skype and all that this week, so if I disappear for a little bit, just hang in there because I'll just dial back in. But I have had some real problems last night with the show with Lori Fanilla, and then a couple of my shows this week earlier was just getting dropped from my shows, and I think it's Skype. My Skype connection, for some reason, is just not as strong as it used to be. But yeah, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. We're still looking at Joy to You and Me, and that's Robert Burney's web pages, and dealing with this topic of co-dependency. And so, he has lots of stuff on there about inner child work, relationship type material. He's Robert Burney is a codependence therapist. He's a spiritual, and he's an author. He's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls, and so his web pages are primarily based on his book, and he's got all kinds of excerpts from his book and stuff. So I hope you will check it out. His link is www.joy, JOY, the number 2, EU.com/codependent.htm. Good stuff. I really like it. Some of the stuff I relate to, some of it I don't. That's the way it is with most survivors of abuse. Like not all of us are going to relate to everything we read, but he's primarily talking about when people have, made us feel, or shamed us and made us feel unworthy. And, he's talking about his, parents doing that. But it could be anybody in a person's life who they've run into as a child who made them feel that way, a teacher, a coach, a neighbor, someone in the family. So it doesn't have to necessarily always be the parents, but he's sort of writing from that point, and I can kind of relate to a lot of what he's saying, but it's just good information. I hope everybody's getting something out of this. We've been on this for about 2 months now, so you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do all my shows. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm also a survivor of child abuse, and I wanted to be just one more voice speaking out to add to all the other voices. Really, there are a lot of people talking out here about child abuse and the effects of child abuse. A lot of people talking about their own stories. Angela Shelton. I mean, so many people. Lori Fanilla is another one, and there's lots of people out there who are very encouraging. There's all kinds of men too, like Keith Smith, and I mean, there's so many. Arnie Alberts, I believe that's his name, Arnie, and so many people. I just wanted to add my voice to their voice, and the more people talking about child abuse, and the more people raising awareness and creating awareness is really the number one way to actually prevent and stop child abuse, and to help other survivors who may be feeling so alone, and that there's nobody out there, there's no one there to, that they're all alone, right? That's how I was feeling. I think that's how a lot of people feel. And so that's why I wanted to do my shows. So you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows. I'm talking about abuse. It's a sensitive subject, and, I'm okay to talk about it. I've had to deal with this my whole life, and, I don't mind talking about it, but I know a lot of people may find the material uncomfortable. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and if you feel like the topics of abuse and violence and sexual violence and whatnot will bother you, then don't listen to my shows, right? You have to know what's good for you to listen to, and if it makes you uncomfortable, you have to turn it off. So that is your permission to listen to my shows. Just have an adult, somebody who does care about what you're doing, a parent or caregiver, teacher, coach, mentor, somebody in your life to listen to the show with you to make sure it's something you should be listening to. I appreciate that very much. Keep yourself safe online. So we're going to get right into this topic here. This is looking at a web page that's called, we left off here yesterday about halfway through, but it's called A Dance of Suffering, Shame, and Self-Abuse by Robert Burney, Burney. And we were going through, and he's talking about codependence. It's ingrained in our core relationship with ourselves. And he says, as little kids we were assaulted with the message that there was something wrong with us. We got this message from our parents, or that's what he says here, our parents. But it could have been anybody who inflicted that upon us. The society is really quite codependent, and so the issue is that it doesn't necessarily have to be the parents that cause this problem. It could be somebody else. But he says codependence is vicious because it causes us to hate and abuse ourselves and we were taught to judge and shame ourselves for being human, and that the person was somehow not worthy and not lovable. So he goes on to talk about his own story here, and then he says, is it any wonder that at my core I felt unworthy and unlovable? Is it any wonder that as an adult I happened to self-abuse? So he says the pain of being unworthy and shameful was so great that I had to learn ways to go unconscious and disconnect from my feelings. And the ways in which I learned to protect myself from that pain and nurture myself when I was hurting so badly were with things like drugs and alcohol, food and cigarettes, relationships and work, obsession and rumination. So this is what he's saying here. Turn to things like drugs and alcohol, food and cigarettes, relationships and work and things to try to soothe himself. And I mean, this is what so many people do. I know I've done it my whole entire life. I have an addiction problem. I realize it now, and so I'm very careful what I do. But I stopped doing drugs when I was 21, but I was looking for something to take the place of what was missing in my life. That was love and care, concern, a relationship with my parents, a bond with my parents that I so needed and so didn't get, and love and kindness, mercy, compassion. All of those things were missing, and so I was looking continually for something to comfort me when I was a young kid, and especially I always said I would never do drugs until about the age of 12 because and I thought, no, I would never do drugs. And at the age of 12, I actually started smoking marijuana and ended up doing things like PCP, angel dust, and I went from there to be a heavy duty pot smoker, marijuana smoker, just always high, every day, and always looking to be high. And then I went from there to also using alcohol. So this is 12 years old. So alcohol, and all the way through my ninth grade, I was about 13 years old. There was a whole lot of physical abuse in my home. At the time, I was, being pummeled on a regular basis and was looking to escape. So I turned to all kinds of drugs. And by the time I was 16, 17 years old, I was using crystal meth and all kinds of things, cocaine and everything, speed on a regular basis. And I was just basically a speed addict. And then all the way till I was about 19, 20, and I was using LSD and all kinds of things. I was just always high, looking to be high, and that was just my own, way of trying to get something I was missing out on. And I think that happens for a lot of people. I didn't necessarily use food because, I was running around with people who liked to party and friends and whatnot. We were just basically doing drugs, but then I got older, so I got off the drugs when I was 21, and then I started using food, and I was still using cigarettes as a means to try to comfort and self-soothe. It's food for me, and so I have to be very careful what I'm doing. And I don't really drink that much. I don't allow myself to because I know that I have an addictive personality. So I mean, I don't mind having a drink, but I certainly know what to look for and when to cut myself off because I'm fighting against these addictions, right? But I understand what he's saying, the whole trying to find something, to help us feel better. And I know so many people do, and some people are shopaholics, like my sister. She's not a drug user and she's not a drinker, but she's a shopaholic. So she uses shopping to try to soothe herself and try to feel better about herself. She grew up in the same home I did. Another one of my sisters drank quite heavily. She used alcohol and food for her thing. And two of my brothers killed themselves, all due to drug use and horrible lifestyles. So my family is basically went on this self-destructive lifestyle after the growing up abused in the home that we were living in. Absolutely horrible. So I understand what he's saying here. And he says, the way it works in practice is like this. He says, I'm feeling fat. I judge myself for feeling fat, for being fat. I shame myself for being fat. I beat myself for being fat. Then I am hurting so badly that I have to relieve some of the pain. So to nurture myself, I eat a pizza. Then I judge myself for eating the pizza, etc., etc. It's like a little cycle, like a vicious cycle that people get on, continually making themselves feel bad about how they look, who they are, the way we are, right? And then we use these things that actually are detrimental to us. For instance, I'll use cigarettes here for an example because I still smoke, and I quit for a year and 2 months. But I'm back on them now for another year and a half, so I need to quit again, right? And we just continually beat ourselves up for this kind of stuff instead of getting help. and working through what's actually causing the root cause of my addiction, right? And I realize now, because I'm on my healing journey, 4 years into my healing journey, doing enough research, enough reading, and talking to people, that I use all these things because I'm trying to get something that I was missing from so long ago. Still trying to get that, and what do? I use something just to take the place. So instead of allowing myself to get in touch with that need that's inside of me, which is probably my inner child screaming out for love and care and attention, nurturing, bonding, with my parents, which never happened. I just use cigarettes because it makes me feel better. And sadly enough, it doesn't make me feel better, because the cigarettes are horrible, they're expensive, and they're deadly, and they stink, and they're killing me. And I've been smoking something since I was 12 years old, right? So I have had something smoking. I have been burning stuff and smoking it. I was smoking probably. I don't even want to. I can't even try to figure out how much marijuana, like pot, I was smoking as a child. I was smoking huge amounts of marijuana, probably what would be considered to be about 3 to 4 packs of cigarettes a day. And then I went to cigarettes as well as marijuana, so I was probably smoking. By the time I was smoking about 6-7 packs of cigarettes a day, in equivalent, because I was sitting as well. So then I got off the drugs and all the pot and everything. I quit everything except for the cigarettes when I was 21, and I was still smoking about 1.5 to 2 packs a day of cigarettes. And that's at the age of 21, so I had been smoking heavy since I was 12. And I mean, it's taken a toll on my body, sure it has, but also the abuse that I suffered has taken a huge toll on my body, as well as the self-inflicted abuse, So, yeah, it's not good, right? And I come from my mother was very sick all her life, and her mother, the genetics of our family, the physical health that I have from my parents, is sort of it's evident in my body. I see the same things happening in my body that happened to my mother, except for not as bad, because my mother had like 10 children, which didn't help, and all of them under duress. Like, she didn't want these kids and didn't want to be pregnant, didn't want this man touching her, and didn't want, she was just in this marriage. I don't know why she stayed, but we talk about this all the time. But the thing is I see this sort of the same breakdown in my body that my mother had, problems with her feet and legs, and problems with her heart. We have a heart defect, and it's all of us have this heart defect, and brain tumors and stuff like that. So I mean, it's horrible, to think, well, I could be helping myself if I quit smoking, and yet I use these cigarettes to sort of keep me calm. It's like, well, as long as I can have a cigarette, I'm okay. It's like having a snuggle blanket, like as a kid having a blanket, like a comfort blanket that you drag around with you, or a stuffed animal or something that, as a child, that gives you that peace and gives you that security. It makes you feel good, like a security blanket. And that's my choice. My cigarettes are my security blanket, which is really horrible, right? You'd think I could pick something a little bit better than that. But this is what I'm saying. This is what a lot of people do, and they don't realize it. They don't realize that what they're doing is a cover up, a security thing from what's something that's happened to them probably in the past. And sometimes it doesn't have to do with abuse. It could have been some traumatic thing that happened that caused them to feel anxiety or uptight. I mean, everybody's had something, go on in their life that is traumatic, you know what I mean, and it could cause that. And that's kind of sort of like symptoms like PTSD and whatnot, like things that kind of come on because of traumatic experiences. It doesn't have to necessarily mean a person is abused just because they smoke cigarettes or drink or become alcoholics. People will use this stuff for many reasons. But this is sort of, for people who have, excuse me, my voice is terrible today. For people who have survived abuse, and lived through it, and will quite often reach out for something like that. And my family is like a prime example of like what happened to the kids, because my parents were not drug users and they were not alcoholics. I mean, my mom was using prescription pills because their doctors had her on all kinds of stuff. My dad was using things like NyQuil, drinking NyQuil at night, like by the, half a bottle full. But the thing is they weren't using like other drugs, and they, my mom did smoke. Dad smoked too, but he quit. But they weren't like people today, using cocaine and crystal meth and trying to raise 10 kids. I mean, 3 of the children were born stillborn, so that left 7 living kids. But they were, and they weren't big drinkers. They just hated life. They hated each other. My dad will say up and down that he didn't and that he loved my mother, but I don't know, he was living in some other reality because he didn't ever tell her that, and he never showed her that. He was a horrible man, and my mother just dealt with the best she could, and instead of realizing that she could have got out and got all of us out to safety, right? So she just became an abuser too. It's just absolutely horrible. But from day one, my oldest is 18 years older than me, and she's passed on now. But she talks about the way they grew up, and she says it was really no difference. From what you experienced in growing up with her, they experienced the same thing. She was just a little younger, right? My mother was 38 when I came around. She was 38 when I was born, and so that means, most of the abuse that she was inflicting upon me was from about the time when she turned 4, 35, and onwards. So my mother, by the time I was 10, my mother was 48, and she was really abusing me in every way. So she was older than me right now, and she had all these kids, and and I was the youngest, and she was just miserable. She was like a 60, 70-year-old by the time she was 48. You see pictures of her. She looked absolutely worn out, People thought that she was my grandmother. She looked so old. Both of my parents did. And it's because they were so hateful. They hated each other, and they would curse each other, first thing in the morning. Like, my dad would go in the kitchen, and my mom would be, like, cursing him. Then my dad would be cursing her, and they'd be fighting. And this would be, like every morning. They never, ever said a kind word to each other. And in restaurants, they would, like, beat each other up. They actually had fights in restaurants, and we used to hate to go out with them, like, in public, because they were so bad. I mean, they just didn't care where they were. Their life was just this drama, this circus, and like, they brought us into that, and they made us, and having to listen to their sordid, sexual issues and whatnot. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. Like, no child should ever have to listen to that. My mother continued to do that all the way until she died. And my dad continued to attack her and abuse her until she died, and it was absolutely horrible that 2 people would spend their lives doing that. You know what I mean? But this is the aftermath. Like, this is what we all had to pay for. We paid the price because they couldn't get their self straightened out. And so many times that's the case. We're the abused children. I mean, we're just basically paying the price for our parents' inability to do the right thing and make the right choices. And I mean, that's very sad. So then, as adult survivors, we're just going to continue on in that, not making the right choices and decisions. And I mean, with myself, I've had to fight with this my whole life because I don't even know how to make the right decisions. And sometimes I do, but I still don't do it. Sometimes I know and I see what I need to do, as far as my own health goes, or different things like that. Oh, my good friend Gypsy Witch is here. Hello, good morning. And glad you could be here, my dear friend. And it's like, sometimes we're supposed to be making these choices, like most people would find this stuff very easy to do, making choices like to take care of themselves. And for people like myself and people who have been so beaten down and so just taught such a horrible way of how to live this life, it's incredibly hard to try to come out from underneath of that and make the right decisions and choices for ourselves. And I think, it's hard. Most people would think it's so easy to do things, so easy to go to the doctor, you know what I mean? So easy to do things. So easy to take care of ourselves, right? Quit smoking, get exercise, get regular sleep. This is things that a lot of adult survivors of child abuse have a hard time with. Normal stuff, that most people have no problem with. And so, it's hard, and we have to recognize these things and then, do something about it. And that's what I'm working on, right? And it's been 4 years since I really began my healing journey. So, I'm doing really well, I think. And, but I still have things that I need to work on, sure. So he says here, so the way it works, like he was saying, he eats the peach peel, he blames himself, judges himself, like for being fat, let's say. And then he shames himself, and then he beats himself up for it. Then he's hurting so bad because of that he has to relieve some of the pain. So he nurtures himself by eating some more pizza. And it's just a cycle, right? He says the disease, this is a functional cycle. The shame begets the self-abuse, which begets the shame, which serves the purpose of the disease, which is to keep us separate so we don't set ourselves up to fail by believing obviously our purpose to be happy and enjoy being alive. That's quite interesting. Almost, it's just self-sabotage, self-sabotage. And it's another form of it, I guess, right? The way to stop this cycle, he says, is twofold and simple in theory, but extremely hard to implement on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis in our lives. The first part has to do with removing the shame from our inner process. And this is complicated and multi-leveled process that involves changing belief systems that are dictating our reactions to life. So he says this first part has to do with removing the shame from our inner process. And this is complicated and multi-leveled process that involves changing the belief systems that are dictating our reactions to life. Belief systems. We've got to change those belief systems because that's why we're feeling shame, right? I mean, myself, I'll just speak about myself, you know. If I'm feeling shame, and I am feeling shame, then the reason I'm feeling shame is because I have a extremely messed up set of belief systems. So he says this includes everything from positive affirmations to grief, emotional energy release work, to support groups, to meditation and prayer, to inner child work, etc., so that we can change our relationship with ourselves at the core and start treating ourselves in healthier ways. And the second part, he says, is simpler and usually harder. It involves taking the action, and the action refers to the specific behavior. So he says we have to take action to do all the things listed in the first part as well. Changing the behavior that is giving us a reason for the shame, just saying no or yes if the behavior in question is something like not eating or isolating or not exercising. And even though it may sometimes work in the short run to use shame and judgment to get ourselves to change a behavior, in the long term, in alignment with our goal of having a more loving relationship with ourselves so that we can be happy, it is much more powerful to take that action in a loving way. Yeah, definitely. Instead of saying, I'm so bad because I don't do this. Oh, I hear people do this all the time. Oh, God, I'm so lazy. You know, they'll say like, I know I'm supposed to be working out. I'm just horrible and I'm just fat and I'm lazy. And they'll say all these things, some bad things about themselves and negative statements about themselves and believing it, that they are bad because they didn't work out, you know, or they're bad because they didn't go for a walk after work or whatever, you know, or that they ate that piece of chocolate or they ate that piece of cake and all of a sudden it's like, I'm so useless, I'm so worthless, I ate that chocolate cake. Well, I don't have too many problems with that because, you know, if I want the cake, I just eat it and then I'm happy. But the thing is like, I have a real problem with that. I know that I've had a lot of trauma. And I'm not trying to look like I was when I was 20 years old. Actually, I was using drugs, and so I was incredibly skinny and very sickly. But the thing is I started to work out when I was about 22. I started to get myself, after I got off the drugs at 21. The next year, I really started working on getting my health back. And I actually did get a lot of my health back. And by the time I was 23, I was looking pretty good. But the thing is I'm not trying to look 23 again. You know, I'm like 45 years old. Like, let's get a break, let's get a grip. I don't. The thing is I would like to get myself in a better position, health-wise, right? And so, you know, I sit there and I think, okay, I should be doing these exercises and stretches because my hips always going out of place and my ankle's all screwed up and I can't do much physically, right? So, you know, I think, well, I could be doing my exercises and stretches, and I don't, but I don't come down hard on myself because, like, sometimes, you know, we have things that are going on in our life that we have to give ourselves a little bit of room and credit for, you know. Like, we can't just always stick to a routine. But I think that it's important to have these routines and, like, you know, not coming down too hard on ourselves if we, like, just, you know, if things come up and it just messes up our routines. And I got allergies, sorry about that. I'm not sick or anything, but I have major allergies. But we should stick to a routine to feel better. You know, take my vitamins, for instance. Gypsy Witch would agree. My friend Gypsy Witch here in the chat room is always telling me to take my vitamins. So, but I'm doing better on it. You know what I mean? It's just these little things that we can do for ourselves. You know, and if you miss a day or you miss something, you don't want to come down hard on yourself because that sets yourself up to feel that shame again. That sets yourself up to be to make yourself feel being alive. Oh, that's my vitamins. I'm not exercising. I must just be useless. I must just be worthless, like my parents said like 40 years ago. I don't think so. You know what I mean? Like, we're just doing that to ourselves, right? It's like, you know, we have to just find what works for us and find, you know, not be too hard on ourselves, not set these too high of goals. Because if you set too high of goals, it's real easy to get down on yourself. And so I don't set too high of goals. I just set these manageable goals that I think I can manage, you know. And sometimes I have to reevaluate them because sometimes things come up and these goals get pushed a little bit aside, and I think, okay, I'm gonna have to like go, sort of take it back a notch, because it's too much, right? Because we don't want to start putting all this stuff on ourselves. It just sets us up to feel more shame and pain, and we're self-inflicted that way. All we're doing is doing that to ourselves then. So I think I like what he has to say here. We have to be, do some work on ourselves, but not to the point where we're not being loving to ourselves in a loving way. If we're just going to shame ourselves because we're not making progress or something, all we're doing is hurting ourselves again, right? So he says this involves setting a boundary for the little child inside of us who wants instant gratification and instant relief out of the loving adult in us who understands the concept of delayed gratification. So he says, if I exercise every day, I will feel much better in the long run. And true pride comes from action taken. It is false pride to feel good about ourselves in comparison because of looks, talent, intelligence, or being forced to become spiritual, healthy, or sober. Those are gifts. But he says true pride is taking credit for the action we have taken to foster, nurture, and maintain those gifts. So that's quite interesting to take a look at there. He says the way to break the self-destructive cycle, to stop the dance of shame, suffering, and self-abuse is to set loving boundaries for ourselves in the moment of that desperate need for immediate gratification, and to know that though it is not shameful if we can't do it perfectly or all the time, we need to just do it. We need to stand up for our true self to our wounded self in order to love ourselves. So that's quite interesting. That's the end of that portion of it. But we'll continue on. We'll take a look at Monday. We'll take a look at the codependency recovery process, the next part of this. You can take a look at this yourself, and that's from www.joy, Joy, the number 2, MEU.com/codependent.htm, and that's Robert Birdie's web pages. And he's written the book Codependency After Wounded Souls. He's got lots of excerpts here from his book. So I hope you will be sure and check his web pages out. But yeah, this is just it. I mean, it's like we have to, if we're going to stop, like he said, this destructive cycle, to stop the dance of shame, suffering, and self-abuse, we have to set loving boundaries for ourselves in the moment, of that desperate need, and say, okay, I can do this, and it may not happen right now, it may not happen immediately, but I can work towards it, and I can set these little manageable goals, and that's what I've done for myself. That's why I don't judge myself by the world's standards, because what the world would think, the world might take a look at my situation and say, well, you're just an idiot. I mean, if you can't do this stuff, then what's the matter with you? Because the world, looking in, may not some of these hurdles, and how hard it is for me to face some of these things, and to face some of these days, and to face some of this stuff, right? Most people would it's a huge problem because I don't like anybody touching my body. The only people I allow to touch my body is people that I say is okay to touch my body, and I don't necessarily want some of these doctors touching my body. I mean, I have an issue with that, right? I mean, I have an issue with people looking at me, and that's from being beaten and tortured in the front yard and out in parking lots in Kmart, My mother would just beat me out in public and just leave me on the ground, and just scream and curse at me, and, I mean, this is what, and onlookers watching the whole thing, right? That's not happened my whole life, and so I don't really like people looking at me or watching me. I have a bit of an issue with that. So there's all these things that, for most people, it's just no problem, not an issue at all. For me, it's like, it's a huge thing, and so I've had to do small baby steps to try to get over this stuff, and it's not easy, right? It's like I feel like people are looking at me, they must be seeing something. They probably see something that they don't like, and that's the whole feeling self-worthless, that whole damaged self, right? So I'm still learning how to recover. Obviously, I'm still on my recovery, my healing journey, right? So, but 4 years into it, I'm still working on this stuff, right? So this tells you how long it can take. But you have to make sure you get some, like, don't allow yourself to suffer from this and just by yourself. And, even if you do self-help, but just make sure that you do give yourself permission to heal, and if you can try... if you don't want to go anonymous, if you don't tell people your name, you can go onto some of these anonymous group supports. That's what I did. I went onto an anonymous group because I got to talk to people who had been there, who understood where I was coming from, and they know the pain of what that's like to be tortured as a child in every way, and I'm talking every way, right? I mean, this is a horrible thing for a child to have to go through. And then for myself later on, years later, trying to learn how to get in touch with that child from so long ago and try to nurture and try to tell her it's okay. You're never going to get that love from your parents, but I can love you. I can love myself, right? So that's the thing. And, that's very helpful to talk to people. So if you don't have somebody to talk to and you're really suffering along, you make sure you call a crisis line if you can't cope. But you do something. You make sure that you allow yourself, to get some help, right? Because we all deserve to have a good life. We all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. And like nobody should have done this to us in the first place, right? But if we have to ultimately be responsible for our healing journey. And so it takes the first step, and a lot of times that first step is reaching out. And so make sure that you do stick around and you allow yourself to get some help, right? Have a great day, everybody. Have a nice weekend. I'll be back on tonight. I'll be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio tonight, as we're here on Dreamcatcher on Blog Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers with Star Miles. And Donna Shear might be on there, but I don't know. She's got some great news in her family. But I know I'll be on there with Star. And then I'll be back on my show. I might do my show tonight, too, just because I'll be on Dreamcatchers. So we'll see. I'll do child abuse prevention, and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And then the weekend, I'm going to try to do those this weekend. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. Take good care of yourself. I'm counting on that, right? I know that there's people counting on me to make the right decisions and right choices and to get myself some help and to allow myself to be well and enjoy this life. So I'm counting on you, and I'm going to put this on you now. You should want to do it for yourself. 4 years ago when I didn't even cared or known. And the thing is I thought, no more of that. I made a commitment to myself, right, to stick around. I made a commitment to myself to never ever allow myself to think like so much better. I did not deserve to suffer that as a child. It was not my fault. So it's not your fault. And we need to allow ourselves to enjoy this life and to get some help, right? And if we don't, we're just hurting ourselves because as an adult we have to make the right decisions for ourselves. And so many times we don't. So make sure you do. You make the right decisions for yourself. You stick around, make a phone call if you have to, whatever it is. You sometimes we have to go through those bad days to get to those good days, right? But if we don't allow ourselves to do that, we won't see those good days. So it's really ultimately up to us, right? So have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.